Okay, Coinbase daily and weekly analysis. Today's date is the 31st of December, and this chart has piqued my interest really heading into Q1 for a number of reasons, and I want to use this video to highlight what those reasons are. So here we can see Coinbase on the daily chart dating back to early 2014. We can see we made this new low in April this year. That bottomed out at around 143, and then we shot right up to 444, which was the local top. Okay, so if I'm looking to position myself for a trade here, there's a number of things that I want to be looking at, and one of those is moving averages. And the two key ones that I want to highlight on this chart are the 200-day and the 50-day. So we've got the 50-day in red and the 200-day in blue. And I want to highlight the importance of this thing called a death cross, right? Which is where the 50-day crosses below the 200-day. And particularly, that's an area of interest here. We can see we've got one there. And we can also see that we've got another one here. Okay. Now, in trading terms, a death cross is seen as a really bearish indicator. But we can see here on Coinbase that the last two instances actually mark the low. So this death cross occurred after we made a low in September 24. This death cross occurred just a few days before price bottomed out at that April level that I mentioned earlier. Is that enough for us to get super bullish at this level, thinking, right, okay, well, we know that a death cross has occurred previously and it was actually a bullish indicator? Well, no, not really, because price could actually drop further from this death cross. And I want to highlight another instance here, which we saw in January of 2022. So this death cross occurred at a similar time of year to this one, just a month later, and we can see that price failed to recover above the 50-day moving average. It tried here, and then it eventually bottomed out, and we saw these moving averages moving sideways for a while before the trend recovered in June 2023. So we can look at this in two ways. We can say, okay, well, if we're in a bullish trend, which we undoubtedly are at this moment of time since making those lows in April, then we want to be leaning towards a bullish outcome. And a bullish outcome here would be kind of a similar outcome to what we saw in September 24 and April of this year, when the 50-day crossed below the 200-day, price found a bottom and then it recovered higher. How do we know if that's going to be the case this time around? Well, we've got the 50-day moving average as our primary clue, right? We don't need to rush into a trade right now, but we can see when price recovered the 50-day in the last two instances where a death cross occurred, we can see that we had these big volume spikes. Okay, so we had this one here and we had this one here, right? So if we're seeing price recover the 50-day moving average with volume, that might be a nice signal that Coinbase is about to shape up for a really strong Q1. If we don't see that happen, okay, we might look at 2022 and think we might be in for a rerun of that, but that isn't my base case at this moment in time, and I'll tell you for why. In addition to this death cross, I also want to highlight a key Fibonacci level. So let's go from the April swing low to the swing high that occurred in July of this year, and we're just going to draw a simple Fibonacci retracement, okay? And we want to see, right, where is price presently? Price is presently between the 61.8 and the 78.6. That's an area that we know is a golden pocket, okay? So again, that gives us another area of interest to look at in addition to that 50-day moving average that we spoke about previously. I also want to draw attention to this 50% retracement level, which we can see is now a key pivot. We can see that price held up at that level in August of this year, but then broke down below that level and flipped it to short-term resistance during the shakeout that we've had in Q4 of this year. So if we see, let's just zoom in a little bit here, we can see that this area, this purple shaded bar, this key pivot that I've just drawn in, that aligns nicely with our 50-day and our 200-day moving average. So again, we can wait here. I'm happy waiting. If price wants to carry on making a short-term low, that's fine. But if we see a recovery from this level here down from the low 200s and a superb rally back up to this key pivot just below 300, and we see that happening with volume, we know that that could be a sign that Coinbase is about to pose a nice recovery. We can see how that played out here in the prior instance. So again, we had this key pivot level here, price broke below it, it flipped it into resistance. I'm just going to get rid of that just to tidy up the chart slightly. And then where did that volume spike occur? It occurred here, right in this bull flag formation. So if we see this pattern start to play out again, so again, we see a recovery from the lows, nice push high, then a consolidation that occurs on volume, and then a breakout from that range, again on volume, that might be a nice signal to enter a long position. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing on the daily chart, but I want to have a look at the weekly chart as well, just to see if there's confluence there. So here's the weekly. The weekly chart I like to look at in log. The previous one was linear. That's just a preference that I have. And we can see that we've got this potential inverted head and shoulders pattern, right? So we've got one there. That's the left shoulder. We've got this one here, which could potentially be the head. And then we've got this level over here, which we're looking at as a potential right shoulder. Okay, so we know the chart pattern, it's a bullish continuation pattern, but again, let's go back to our fibs and see if we can see a little bit more confluence with these levels. So I'm going to draw a fib here on the left shoulder from the swing high that occurred in June 2024 to the prior low, and we can see where price found buyers, right? So it was between the 1618 and the 1786 level. I'm going to draw in a support bar there so we know we can highlight it in a bit more detail. So let's flip that to green. Okay, so that's how this left shoulder played out. What about this right shoulder? Okay, so we're going to go from the swing high that occurred in October, just like we did on the left shoulder. We're going to draw it down to that low. And what does that give us? Okay, well, it shows us that again, there's a nice bit of symmetry here, right? We can see that price is once again retraced down to this 1618 level to the 1786 level. We can actually notice that price did break below this level in the prior instance, so again, there's no need to rush here. But if we see price recover in this zone, that might be further evidence that Coinbase is due for a nice run. And in terms of a target, well, if we draw the neckline of this inverted head and shoulders pattern, we can see that we've got a nice couple of touch points here. So I'm going to draw that just to there. Okay, and looking out towards May time, this all depends if we see this short-term recovery into January. That gives this move some real potential upside because the neckline is way above this 500 level and price currently trading at 2316. That gives Coinbase a whole lot of potential.